Welcome to the Board Game Academics Podcast, where we explore the crossroads of scholarship, play, and practice. I'm your host, Christopher Carbone, scholar, educator, and of course, lifelong gamer. Each week this semester, we discuss with brilliant minds how academic games, especially analog games, inform real-world practice, support meaningful change, and challenge us to think critically, whether in the classroom, clinics, communities, or beyond. This week, I'm joined by
Jason Matthews.
Welcome, Jason. Jason, we're so glad to have you here this week. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you here to tabletop gaming?
Fantastic, Chris. My name is Jason Matthews, and I am a board game designer, primarily. At least that's how I entered the industry. And I work here in Washington, D.C. with a company named Fort Circle Games. All of the games that I've designed and Fort Circle Games are kind of historical simulation games. And I am the chairman of the GAMA Education Committee and had served previously on GAMA's board.
Excellent. So glad to have you here. So Jason, for those academics who may not be familiar with GAMA, maybe you could tell us a little bit about GAMA and its history and what it's doing today.
For sure. As you know, Chris, the origin of the hobby kind of surrounds the war game companies, and initially Avalon Hill and SBI, who were the two kind of giants at the time, created GAMA to run Origins. They didn't particularly trust one another, and so they wanted a neutral party to organize the main gaming convention for the hobby. And from that origin, GAMA has developed into a trade association, an honest trade association, and in the last decade or so, GAMA expanded its mission to incorporate all segments of the commercial aspects of gaming now. So not only are publishers and manufacturers members of GAMA, but so are media personalities and web channels, people who organize conventions, and of course, game designers. Pretty much if you are making $2 in gaming, you can become a GAMA member.
Excellent. And tell us a little bit more about the subcommittee for education and professional development.
So the subcommittee had existed previously, and of course, like a lot of other trade associations, GAMA had a lot of difficulty during COVID, and the committee kind of fell off.
Sure.
And so when I was a member of the board, we reinstituted the committee, and I wanted to chair it because I was very passionate about this subject. Namely, how can we use gaming in ways to facilitate America's educational needs and mission, and since I believe very much in that idea, I wanted to get the committee started again. GAMA in the past had always had some outreach, mostly to teachers, mostly kind of to high school and junior high school teachers in the past, either running kind of educational tracks at the conventions or, providing discounts, that sort of thing. But even that had fallen away. And of course, in more conventional times, we've had all of these gaming programs evolve and develop at our universities. And so there is a whole academic infrastructure that didn't always exist. And I think it's important for GAMA to build bridges and connections with that infrastructure as well.
Yeah, it's an amazing development that in higher education, there are more and more game programs out there that are inspiring, educating, and developing emerging designers. And we're seeing such great work from all the faculty they're teaching and all of these emerging designers. And we're going to see a next generation, seems like, Jason, as far as like the up and coming designers are going to be educated from these different programs.
I think that's inevitably true. And it's, a good thing because there is a craft and a science to game design as well. And it's good that we're creating people with that skill set.
Absolutely. Now, yourself as a game designer, did obviously historic war games. I mean, that is a heavy take on. That is an educational, academic, research, scholarship endeavor. That's not just tic tac toe.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of other people in Washington, I care about these subjects, and
Yeah.
so it it is it has an academic component and kind of a scholarship requirement. But since I enjoy it, if you like the reading, then it's okay. If you don't like the reading,
Yes.
it's a pain in the ass.
But it's a great way to educate people on those historic events and put them at that ground level in some cases because I mean, thankfully, hopefully, how else could you know? You could read these things abstractly, but experientially, to play a game and to see those strategies and to see the historical events kind of unfold is, in some ways, very revolutionary. I mean, it's something that we've done historically to kind of guide troops militarily and to kind of develop strategies historically. But now in today's age, we can actually have that kind of almost abstractly, but like a firsthand experience of like facing down other troops and other armies, and again in a historical context.
I totally agree, and I think, well, I have a soapbox component of this, and then just kind of a trend of where the hobby is. The soapbox component is from my personal vantage point. Most Americans don't know anywhere near enough about either their history or how their government functions. And I think if we're going to wait for them to sit down and read a book about the subject, we will be waiting a very long time. And the danger of that lack of understanding and experiential learning and any other form of learning you want to put into this category is now kind of revealing itself in our democracy. And so
Absolutely.
I feel like clearly board games are not going to fix this by themselves, but can we contribute a little bit by helping people understand, okay, this is how your government works, this is what your history is, telling some hard stories so that and at the same time by putting people in perspective of decision makers at different points in American history, can we help them understand, okay, this is why this happened and why
Yes.
we don't want to repeat it or do want to repeat it, whatever the context might be.
Yes.
So, so I feel strongly about that portion of it as someone who's in this historical gaming space. And then additionally, I think it's been an exciting development in my portion of the hobby that we've really moved on from the era of Gettysburg and Stalingrad being the only thing that we were talking about in a historical gaming space. And so now for Fort Circle, we have games like Votes for Women, like there's essentially no historical subject that is being unexplored, and it doesn't have to have treads or swords or cannons in order to warrant um, gaming exploration.
It's true. And like we said, you read it in a textbook, ideally a primary source, of course, but you read it in a book, and there's value there. There's tremendous value there. And you're in a classroom, tremendous value. But there's also value, as you said, tabletop gaming can't do everything, at least not yet. But playing that game at the table, playing those historic events, and having that community around you while that's actually taking place, so that you can have those discussions, you can process those historical moments, and again, like talk to the community around you. Like, did you know that this happened? Did you know this has occurred? Did you see that? Like, and again, like, well, what was their perspective? Like, well, maybe we should play out their perspective. Maybe they had some rationales or reasons, or maybe they were influenced by certain, and you'll actually see that in the game. And that goes so much above and beyond sometimes what you can find in a book.
Absolutely. And so I, the research on this is we need more of it.
You do.
But I do feel that just anecdotally, that interacting with the history keeps the lessons of the subject matter like it wires them better into your brain in the same
Yes.
way that narrative wires things into the human mind better than just looking at fact or statistics or something. Just because we've evolved to learn this way, and so to the extent that games are helping tell a story,
Hmm.
it'll stay with you longer than any other approach.
It's true. Taking on a role, again, sometimes it's more of a black and white situation, sometimes it's different parties or faction situations, and playing out that perspective is so very informative. And then also, like you said, especially as citizens in the United States of America, as we are, uh, taking for granted our democracy, our republic, our history, and our civic duty to take an opportunity to play a game, and then typically the outcome or what you're supposed to do is to win the game, and to go about that and to have choices, and for some reason or another, maybe make the choices that are harder, maybe make the choices that are easier, but maybe those choices affect other events and other groups and other people in negative ways. So to have to like play out that dynamic and then come back to the real world and then look at the world, and then again you have a civic duty to your nation, to be a good citizen, to act properly, to take a role, to take a stand in so many different cases and situations which we're all dealing with, whether it's local, state, or national. It takes on a new context, I think, again. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about that experiential education you're talking about, is that it stays with you longer. That narrative carries with you because you also played a part in that narrative. It wasn't something that happened on a screen or in a book. You made those choices. And again, for those reasons. So maybe it helps you understand your enemy better, or maybe it helps you understand yourself, or again, the context and the rules in which we live. And sometimes that's even, I think that's also such a wonderful opportunity for everybody, not just young people, but for everyone to get engaged in those types of games.
I couldn't agree more. And of course, the other just difficult reality is, you know, the average public school kid is going to get about two classroom periods on the American Civil War, or two classroom
Yeah.
periods on all of World War II,
Yes.
and then everything else, women's suffrage,
Yes.
whatever else you want to talk about. Maybe they're getting 30 minutes total.
If.
So uh, you know, there are humongous gaps, and for most people, the last time that they're going to interact with these questions of American history is going to be that high school classroom. So
Sure.
unless we give them other occasions to be like, hey,
Mm.
did you know? Do you know? Do you really know anything about the Cold War? Did your high school history class even get to the Cold War? Um, you know, uh, if we don't give them any occasion to understand those things, like for instance, with modern contextual dealings with Russia,
Yes.
uh, I think it would be very helpful for people to have a deeper understanding of the Cold War than they do right now.
It's true.
And it's weird for me to have an adult child, fully graduated and educated, who has no conception about the Cold War because she didn't live through 9/11. So
No.
the Cold War is like, to me, the Cold War for her is like World War One is to me. Like, I know something about it, but it's memories that people have told me about rather than things that I experienced.
And I think what you said earlier was so true, because I remember I loved history, and it was just so fascinating. But I do remember the textbooks in like high school and junior high where it was like that you had like huge textbook, and then after World War II, which probably took up half the textbook on the history of the United States, and then there was like, and then the rest, and then like every other battle or war or civic engagement, or like you said, the Cold War or uprising or women's suffrage got like a paragraph, right? Like nothing happened after, or again, because of because of the lack of the education in the classroom, the teachers don't have enough time to get to the more modern stuff. And what we know from our history, or from world history, certainly, is that history is constantly being rewritten, and it's to favor certain political groups and propagandists. And we forget that these major events that affect our history, wherever we are in the world, did not really happen that long ago, despite the fact that oftentimes you'll see like MLK in a black and white photo. I'm like, there was color back then. It wasn't that long ago. Or like you said, women's suffrage was not that long ago. It's just like, and it's like, no, those pictures, they're old and they're sepia film. I'm like, no, that wasn't that
Exactly.
long ago. And a lot of those things are still continuing. So how can we expect the next generation to make competent decisions when they don't understand our history? And again, it gets compressed. It just gets compressed. All the challenging parts get compressed. And that's what I love about tabletop gaming is like I can pick up a game and have a very compressed understanding of what that might be, like you said, for votes for women, and then just go, oh, there was not everybody was on board for this. There was a lot of factions that were against this, and it'd be the factions you would not expect. And it's a
Exactly.
given, right? What,
And
un,
yeah, that's right. I mean, the suffrage movement plays out in very unusual, unexpected ways. The states that were for it, the states that were against it, are not, in contemporary terms, necessarily the places you think is particularly progressive or conservative.
yes,
They're the motivations are very different. And then, of course, within the women's movement, there are splits about
yes,
should black women be included, et cetera, et cetera.
yes.
All of these components that I swear to you, if I got 15 minutes on women's suffrage while I was in high school, it would have been a miracle, and I didn't know
Oh,
any
no.
of those nuances.
And then it was like it wasn't until I think the mid 1970s that women could have a credit card, and then it was like the 1980s where women could have their own bank account, and you're
Yeah,
just,
there
and that wasn't that long ago.
it was not that long ago. There is, I mean, there is kind of like a functional Jim Crow phase of
Yes,
women's rights,
yes,
where okay, yes, yeah, we're going to give you the vote, but all these other things are still foreclosed.
it's true. And again, we're seeing a lot of those situations kind of continuously pop up, and without the education and the understanding of where we came from and why things are the way they are, we're bound to repeat it, right? That's the famous quote: "Those who do not know history are bound to repeat it." So, a lot of ways, it does seem like we're repeating that again, unfortunately.
Tragically so.
Yes, globally too, in
Yes.
fact. So there's a lot of challenges on that. So obviously, Jason, there's again so many wonderful games, obviously, from your company, from yourself, from as a designer. Any other games that you want to kind of highlight as far as like value for you or your family, or maybe even from an educational point of view? I think people would love to hear about that.
So I'm very much a card-driven game fan,
Nice.
and I design in that sphere. But I designed in that sphere because I was lured in by Mark Herman, who designed kind of the first game on the subject, using these mechanisms, which was We the People, and it's the first game
Yes.
about the American Revolutionary War. I'd sort of um, I'd sort of lost interest in wargaming in general
Sure.
because I had come to the conclusion that um, war games had divorced politics from wargaming, or if they had politics in wargaming, it was hardwired and gamey, or it had required a whole separate rule book, and like
Mm-hmm.
had become too monstrous in this regard. And the card driven system allowed kind of an elegant way to insert these rules, and not just insert rules, but to do them contextually. Like
Yes.
you can trigger a rule based on the board state or whatever it is that you want to, or divide decks into segments so that they come out in the right chronological order, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, it was super elegant, and it it did this thing for wargaming, which was to reintroduce the Clausewitz notion that politics is warfare by other means,
Yes.
and or rather warfare is politics by other means, and and it's it seems so important and so revolutionary to me, because it we don't we don't march tanks around maps in order to collect stars. We march tanks around maps because a series of political decisions have been made and have decided that that's what we're trying to do. And if you take that element out of it, the rest of it doesn't make that much sense.
Yes, very much so. And again, that's once again, I think that's the other side of tabletop gaming that I find fascinating is tabletop gaming or playing a game is very much about the rules, right? We all strangely enough, it's the rules that make the game fun.
Yeah.
And once you kind of, especially for the historical games themselves, once you kind of understand the rules as far as the gameplay, if you're playing something educational, like uh let's say example 1960s, the making of a president, right? Like let's just say that game, right? As far as like trying to understand political theory and campaigns and things of that nature, once you get a sense of that, now you can come into the real world and go, wait a minute, I remember those rules in the game and I see the rules that are playing out here. Maybe the rules that are playing out here in the real world are as constructed, and created as the ones in the game. Maybe some of those rules can be changed, or maybe they are there for some insidious kind of reason, right? There's more to all of this that's taking place. And I think it's so good for people to understand the different dynamics that come into play. And you would not know that otherwise, right? We kind of born into the world and we accept things as they are. And tabletop games go, but what if? What if Nixon did win, right? What if he did beat Kennedy? Like, how? Like, oh, okay, I can see the dynamics that would take place. So now when I look at current political situations, I have a better understanding of that because I understand the rules at like on a personal level.
You're, of course, I agree, somewhat, perhaps vainly, but
No.
leaving, but leaving, but leaving that question aside. Similarly, there is a like, okay, why does 1960 not have money?
Mm-hmm.
What and there are very good reasons for that. There are very good historical reasons for that.
Sure.
And it should make Americans wonder, in our living lifetime, you could have the most important presidential election where money was not the central factor.
Yes.
And our elections just, 60 years later are dominated by this question. And why is that true? And how did we get here?
Yes.
And those are important things for people to try and understand.
It really is, and I think like I said, once again, I think I so greatly appreciate your designs and your company's work because I think it's so valuable for all of us, especially in a day and age where digital engagement and media is just so front and centermost with our phones that younger people don't typically have the time or even the desire to sit with something and to really kind of like dwell in it and understand it and contemplate the outcomes and the dynamics that come into play. And I know for so many of our practitioners that for example, like educators in the classroom, they really want the students to be engaged. They really want them to feel the impact of history that's actually happening today, like you said, with like campaign finance, and by doing that, it allows, so many educators out there to be, for lack of a better term, the cool hip teacher who's actually like really engaging on a thing, but also they're walking away with something much more meaningful than again that kind of rote, kind of Socratic kind of method of like boom, 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 boom. Did you get it? Did you learn it? Can you regurgitate it? If you could regurgitate, that'd be great.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I'm sure every great history civics professor out there, political science professor, I mean, any teacher, professional educator out there wants young people, especially, of course, everybody else, but young people especially, to walk out to be educated and better citizens and great for society and to be able to share stories. And I think that's important because um, we're lacking so much of that these days. So, play a game. That's what we're saying, Jason. We're saying play some more games.
Exactly.
I know it's such a radical idea, but I think it's an important thing, and it's something that we talk about a lot. And I know that you and I on the same level, and so many academics and practitioners are out there is the same as well, because play opens people. And again, and that play kind of opens people, and I think in a very positive way, because I think we do get so propagandized to that we adhere to a certain political party or a certain, you know, conservative versus liberal versus leftist versus libertarian, like all of that kind of stuff. And I really love the idea that you can engage in a situation in a world where you get to play all of those different aspects and characteristics and then have a better understanding coming out of it. And again, without that kind of acrimony that
Yeah,
typically
for
comes from
sure.
those.
I
Yeah.
mean, just play, I guess, in general has this quality that not only is it sort of it's educating because it's kind of
Yes.
practicing, but by its very nature, it's also safe, right? So it allows you to explore topics
Hmm.
that might be very, very difficult to have a direct conversation about.
Yes.
But if you're sitting around a game board, take Freedom, the game about the Underground Railroad.
Yep.
Um,
100%.
that that is a brilliant bit of design, but look at the kind of conversation that you can have with that game that would be either a polemic if it was a conversation
Hmm.
or something people would just tune out. Whereas if you sit around a table, we can have a real experience and a discussion around something that is an incredibly important piece of American history.
Hmm. And again, I think one of as like you said, Freedom of the Underground Railroad and Votes for Women. I mean, a lot of these games are educating us on very important historical people that typically don't make it into our general canon of like leaders and such. And I think from uh, just an individual everyday citizen or a young person's perspective, we feel, it's kind of sent to us, we must be rich and powerful in order to lead, or we must look like this kind of person in order to lead. And really, it was the everyday citizens who took up a cause and the everyday soldier who protected their country, that were heroic, that were leaders, and that were uncelebrated. But again, when you play these games and you get to look at these cards and you get to understand a little bit more about history and where these different things came from, it just it brings so much more color into the
Indeed.
picture. Again, dealing instead of dealing with those black and white photos in a textbook that was produced 40 years ago and somehow stopped at Vietnam. I don't know what happened. Everything stopped.
And you didn't do the reading anyway, so what good do we do? I mean, it's all kind of
Yeah. And again, one of the things I think that, and we can't harp on this enough, experiential education. It's good that your kids are in the classroom. It's good that your kids are in college. Get them down, get them to play some tabletop games so they can learn and experience more, but also for your communities too, right? As you mentioned, Jason, obviously we want to have an educated citizenry. Again, so many of these games, just bring them to a community center, bring them to a senior center, play out those games, let people kind of relive the stories, tell their own stories from those times and ages. I mean, there's so much to learn from so many people that lived through those times and saw those different aspects take place, and it has such a warmth and value to it. I don't think we can overstate it.
I, it's obviously true, and and you can just see the difference people um, when you watch people play and their reactions afterwards. And the other thing that is so exciting, I think, about this part of the hobby and this element of it is not only do they have this experience that works with them and like stays in their memory and it informs their decision making, it also inspires people to actually read. Like the
Sure.
book that we can't get you to read. Once you've played
Yes.
a game about it, now all of a sudden you're interested in the subject, you go buy the book. That
Yes.
that's the perfect ending.
100%. Again, it's really a great opportunity, and thank you for your work and your company's work, because I think it's shedding a light on areas within our history that we typically don't have an opportunity to really spend time with, and we need to now more than ever. And again, for all of our practitioners out there who are using tabletop games, I'm sure they would also share the same sentiments too, because they're always looking to engage because they're competing, right? We're all competing with the newest, hottest thing that's happening out there. Why not engage them in something that they're familiar with and also personally engage with? And like I said, you play the game, then go read the books. Like, go read the primary sources, right, Jason? I think we would agree, right? So let's read some primary
Indeed.
sources. I think that'd be fantastic. So,
But
Jason,
anything is better than nothing at this stage. My God.
I agree. I think just reading at this point is better than nothing at this. But
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
I think one of the other interesting parts to this too is sometimes you don't have to go far. Again, your games and so many other games in this kind of context, the rule books obviously have a lot of history. The cards have a lot of history, and sometimes there's supplemental material as well that goes along with this too. And I
Uh,
think again,
I'm
when
sorry. I
often
was going to
we
say, as you know, in Fort Circle games, one of the
yes,
things we're committed to is including primary sources so that, players and kids and whoever are exposed to, read the documents, reach your own
yes,
conclusions, see what the context for this was.
it's wonderful. It's really a great opportunity. So, Jason, with all of that said, obviously, we're so glad to have you and a number of members of GAMA, of the board, actually, coming down to the academic conference that we'll be having on October 4th and 5th at the Strong National Museum of Play. And in fact, you will be hosting a panel as part of GAMA to speak to all of our academics and educators out there. So maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of a glimpse on some of the topics or some of the areas or some of the conversations that you're hoping to have with academics and educators out there.
So I'm so excited to establish or reestablish, however you want to characterize this linkage, because there are, first of all, I think it's important that we can we're only going to succeed in the long run by
Mm,
working together on
yes.
this. And I think all of us, both in the academic sphere and in the commercial sphere, see that there are virtues to gaming that exist well beyond just entertainment.
Yes.
And we just had this long discussion about how it can be used as an educational tool, at least in the historical context. But there's interesting research all over the place on other, numeracy and all of these other psychology, of course, which
Hmm.
perhaps is the area where the most science on the subject has occurred. Um, anyway, so that's out there. The other thing is that as a membership organization like GAMA,
Hmm.
we benefit from having academic expertise on subject matters informing how the hobby is approaching gaming and how we might improve it, how we might make it more accessible to classrooms, how we can help kind of configure our products in order to assist with the educational mission. And most of us in game design or game publishing, well, we're all nerds, and some people may have an academic background, but very few of us are actually teachers or professors. And I don't know where else we're going to get that kind of input or experience without having a linkage between GAMA and BGA and the academic community writ large. In terms of our committee, one of the immediate missions that we're sort of working on is that we want to highlight your work. We think that one thing that we can do is in kind of an interim step
Hmm.
is help inform all of the GAMA members that this interesting research, these interesting papers, these important scientific conclusions are out there circulating, and we as a commercial industry are mostly blithely unaware. And so we the committee is working on creating a system of highlighting to our membership both through our online platform and in our monthly magazine, like academic articles on games that people should read. Like, this is, hey, take a look. This is important. And so that we can at least serve as a little bit of an echo chamber for the excellent research that you guys are doing.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I think it's really a great opportunity too, because I think the more academics and practitioners are connected to the commercial products that come out through GAMA, and I think it's essential because it's educational instructional design, where games are made specifically for the classroom, sometimes take a crazy amount of time for those actually to get out there, and typically they're so under tested and evaluated by the general audience. And in fact, it is the commercial designer games, the ones that are developed by a designer, loved, and have the passion and the commitment from everyone on board, and have had the play testing that brings out. Because I know I've taught K through 12 and also higher education in the classroom. And sometimes the instructional games are fine, right? They kind of fit a role and you can use them, but usually they tend to be, no offense, but a little more on the bland side, right? Again, they haven't had the opportunity to be play tested to the same level, or had the same level of development and design, or and when you play designer tabletop games, hobby games that we typically kind of run with, those games have been play tested and designed and scrutinized to the nth degree, and the artwork is outrageous and the writing is amazing, and the game dynamics and play is, it's not just there to teach you a lesson of like what president was what. It's there to kind of put you in that role, and that takes an extra level. And I think the more that academics and professionals could embed themselves within what's going on with GAMA, what's going on with the trade association, what's going on with tabletop gaming at large, they'll have more access to cutting edge resources and tools and techniques to bring different games to the classroom, that really can pop with students. Because again, typically, if you're looking like the games that you've designed, a lot of those games are super kind of focused for like the 18 to 24 dynamic, right? Like young adults loving games, looking to be educated, looking for something a little more on the crunchy side. I mean, right down the road, that is typically what tabletop gaming is these days.
That's right. And in a more narrow context, and just in operating in DC, of course, this same kind of challenge that you were describing about tailor-made gaming for purpose, in the wargaming context, and by this I mean the professional wargaming folks,
Yes.
the people at DoD, but it's not just DoD, it's all of the intelligence agencies, it's the Coast
Yes.
Guard, it's FEMA, everybody who wants to practice something, um, build the muscle reflex of, how are we going to respond to a crisis or a challenge within the government. Um, they have the same problem, right? They'll go out, it being the government, they'll go out and buy a product or a war game. It'll cost them $100,000, and it is somehow less entertaining or useful than the GMT thing they could have bought for 40.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
um, but I will say that one thing that the professional war gaming space has that we have not had is that the professional wargaming space has an ongoing conference called Connections that is
Mm.
supposed to build that bridge between the commercial wargaming space and the professional folks who are doing it
Yes.
at DoD at all. And this BGA conference will be a first step for what I hope will be like um, an ongoing relationship and an ongoing dialogue. But we have a lot more we can do there. It's essentially a space that's been left open for a long time.
Yeah, we're really happy to be able to be a bridge for GAMA, for the trade industry, for publishers, designers, artists, writers, enthusiasts, gamers. I mean, there's so many people out there, and to kind of bridge them over to all the practitioners and educators, emerging scholars and researchers. Again, like you're saying, Jason, like there's something wonderfully fascinating when, and for so many designers out there as well, you may not know this, but so many people are utilizing your games in such in-depth, wondrous ways. And they're doing scholarship and research, and they're unpacking things, and they're evaluating its kind of premise for different groups and organizations and opportunities. So, as you said, this is already being done in the, as you said, the professional war game kind of market, but there's so many other practical applications, and that's really what board game academics is all about. So we're so happy to be part of that kind of facilitation for there. And again, we want to invite everyone, please do join us for the BGA Conference 2025 happening at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, October 4th to 5th. We have a wonderful website, boardgameacademics.com. Go to the conference section. You'll find a tremendous amount of information, including everything that the Strong Museum has to offer, which is some tremendous collections of tabletop gaming, which also speaks to the history of our nation. Because again, it's very reflective of who we are and how we see ourselves. And going through that collection, I think, is really informative in so many other ways. And again, another great resource for you to use to kind of educate and to support other people in different communities and practitioners and clinics. Just really a great resource. So, Jason, thank you so much for joining us. We will definitely be connecting with you. And if you'd like to learn more about your work, Jason, where can people find you?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find. In real life, I'm a lawyer and a lobbyist, so you can go. That's there. But I'm on all of the social media platforms. Jason DC 1970, whether it's Blue Sky or I still maintain a Twitter account, but I'm somewhat less useful there.
Sure.
And I'm also you can find me as both a player and designer on Board Game Geek, where uh, where I am constantly on answering questions about my ill-written rules.
It's a never-ending process, but it's a process of love. We're all down for
Indeed,
that.
indeed.
Absolutely. And again, you can find more about Jason's designs, his productions, and everything that Jason does in the show notes. So please follow up there. And again, thank you all for joining us here this week. Until next time, keep rolling and keep thinking critically. Take care, everybody.